We're now moving to a session which is called Feminist Terrains, Architectures of Care and Transformation. And I'm very happy to be joined by two Brussels-based folks, so we really welcome home. And so, yeah, let's hear from you and have you warm up the mic. Who are you? What are you doing here?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Gysel. Thank you for inviting me to be here today. I had many different roles, I guess, in my life, and I think that's also maybe the reason why I'm sitting here. But I think it's mainly because I'm the founder, publisher, and editor of a queer feminist publication called Girls Like Us, which is published in Belgium but spread all over the world, and it's been around for 20 years. And because of working with this magazine, I became also more and more involved in queer feminist practices, activist practices, and I've been involved in a lot of these things here in Brussels. I was part of a collective called Mothers and Daughters. We run an ephemeral trans and lesbian bar for 5 years in Brussels. I published a book on manifestos, we'll talk about that later. And the last years, I am the coordinator of all communication and public mediation at Kaaitheater, which is a big theater here in Brussels. So I move with outside and inside of the institution, so to speak.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome. Hugo.
Hi, my name is Hugo, he, they pronouns, and I have different hats as well, but predominantly here for today's conversation is I'm the coordinator and co-founder of Liminal.Brussels. It's an organization that works with men to hold them accountable and make men better allies to gender justice and equality. And within that and outside that, I am also a coach and a master coach and a conflict mediator, so a trainer as well to help in this inclusion and diversity topics as well.
Thank you, and so happy to have you both here. And I just want to say thank you to Federica Mantuan for helping us with framing these panels. It's been really amazing to get these groups of people together, so thank you. And I'm going to read out the introduction for this speech because I knew that the hate speech section of the last one would get my blood boiling and I wouldn't be able to think clearly. So here we go. That first panel showed us that hate speech often exploits ambiguity and coded language. And both of our speakers here, I mean, they deal with language very intentionally. So Jessica has mentioned that she works with manifestos. Hugo works with transformative dialogue. They both have a thought about what collective reading can do. So what we plan to do in this session is to learn about how these feminist practices reclaim language as a tool for building rather than harming. And so we are going to spend the second session of the day looking at how we can build these kinds of spaces through a feminist lens. And I'd like Hugo and Jessica to share their learnings with us about what they're working on. I wanted to start also by just saying that, communities have always been the ones who lead against the resistance, even though it might not feel like that when you read the media headlines, when you see that there are groups of singers in Minnesota, for example, who are coming together to sing, to be in solidarity and fight against what the ICE armed militia are doing on the streets there, or whether it comes to how communities rally together when there's anti-Semitic attacks, for example. I think there's a lot of hope when it comes to communities, and I personally have been very inspired by them. So let's start by understanding your work, because they do seem to be rooted in this shared feminist perspective. So Jessica, you create visibility from the margins, and you're continuing to build on your work. So you said you work in publishing with your Girls Like Us magazine. What inspired you to publish this book, which I haven't read yet? And it's heavy.
It's heavy. It's called Love and Lightning. It's a collection of 100, more or less 100 queer and feminist manifestos from different parts of the world and from spanning a century of time. Voilà, I can talk about it a lot. But I think what inspired me to make the publication is working as an editor on a queer feminist magazine or publication. Of course, you do a lot of research, you talk to a lot of communities, you talk to a lot of artists, and I encountered many of these manifestos throughout the years, and I think at one point, Penguin, the publisher, they published a book of 100 artist manifestos, which I was super interested in, and it turned out it was like 99 men and 1 woman. The woman was Mina Loy. She's a modernist figure from the early 1920s, you know, so I was super disappointed, and I think that was like in 2012, and from then on I started to work, so it was a long process, which I think already embodies everything which is true about queer and feminist publishing. It's always like on the fringes, with low budgets, with people constantly overworked. Yeah, self-publishing is hard, you know, we didn't get funding for this. So, voilà.
What are can I ask a little bit more about it? Because I didn't get to read it on time, I'm so sorry. But those are, like you say, the ideas that don't cross over into the mainstream but are so important by themselves. What are some of the key themes that you were seeing in those manifestos that you and your team were collecting and putting together?
Well, I think it started more from more queer and feminist issues. So a lot of gender equality, gender movements, gender expressions, but by working on it, we thought, okay, we have to maybe get a little bit out of this bubble. So there's also like indigenous tribes coming to big political meetings. It's rights from people in Palestine, it's rights of people in Africa also. So I think if you look at all these manifestos, it's all like putting words, I think, to needs and formulating a desire, formulating actions, giving concrete means, I guess, or tools to shape a world that doesn't exist. And it's funny because some of these manifestos are like 50 years old, but they're more pertinent than ever. And you read them, and you're like, it's crazy. And maybe 10 years ago it was more hopeful, but I feel like today, I think it really came at a good moment. And I just hope people read it and learn from it. And
you've seen the book now, so you better go straight to a bookshop, as well as visiting the museum later to pick it up. But I like this idea that you've described manifestos as putting something on paper that you truly believe in and channeling frustration into something constructive. I think it can feel very empowering to take back a narrative which gets, again, relegated to the margins. And Hugo, in the work that you do, you transform these. That's a very grandiose way of saying it. You transform masculinity and patriarchal structures into something constructive. So how do you do that in your work?
In a small scale. We start small. No, because we work with those who are more privileged and at the center. So it's trying to transform that perspective, already seeing what it means to have privilege, what it means to be a man, what it means to be white, what it means to be educated. And there's, in the terms of language, a lot of the languaging that we work with is the language of the good guy and the not all man guy type of dialogue, because those are narratives that inform how these men are passing through the world, living, interacting through the people, with the people around them, and already starting from there and like deconstructing these small things to see like actually practically, physically, in concrete material ways, what impact does this have? And with that in mind, then we do different things in Liminal. We host the accountability circles where we work with specific case studies brought by the men that come to the circle to see how is it that we can bring it up to more systemic awareness, more concepts, and then like practically what are the things that we can do to transform that situation into better gender justice, more equality, more accountability. We also organize workshops for men around tactility among men to understand consent, but also deconstruct internalized homophobia. We organize trainings about co-responsible contraception, which, for example, there the language was a problem because I had straight men being like, oh, I thought it was for queer men. And I'd be like, but why do queer men need contraception in a heterosexual context? Anyways, there as well, talking about not wanting to use male contraception became an issue because then men didn't feel like they were targeted in it. So language is quite important in the work that we do. And as well, we do individual coaching. We accompany men, individuals who perpetrated harm and want to just be better allies and do their own personal education. Conflict mediation, bringing different discourses together to see how we can help men listen better and not just listen, but understand, not just understand, act upon it.
I feel like you make that sound quite easy. And I want to know, like, so you're talking about how circles and workshops can be effective as feminist spaces for transformation, but why would that approach work, like, especially because you say you're doing it at a small scale, when it doesn't seem to maybe be working elsewhere? So what are the things, do you find that easy, actually, is my question, like, working in these kind of circles and managing to get your point across? I guess I'm asking for a bit of an off-record example of what you, maybe not off-record, an example of what you're doing in these circles and groups.
So, for example, we, in one of the circles, and of course, the elements are confidential, but the relationship between men to the women in their life, how is it that they're benefiting from their either emotional labor or pedagogical labor that the women around them have, and the complaints that they receive that then they don't know how to act, and then they go into, like, for example, silent treatment, or, you know, that was one of the cases that we worked last month, for example, was like how to bring back the dialogue now that 6 months have passed between two people who don't speak anymore, based on one being held accountable by a woman and then not knowing what to do about it. So how to then, like, use that case scenario to make all the men in that space that were there present to see how does that apply to you in your stories, in your relationships, to what extent and degree. And yeah, so that's one concrete way in which we do that. But there's also, like, a difference, like, and I guess that's also what you wanted to hear, is, like, I started this work in 2019, and in 2019, I guess we were doing more of a vulnerability deconstruction work. So also, like, opening up spaces for men to question masculinity and to question the roles that they feel have been imposed upon them and the consequences that patriarchy has for them. And over the years, I've also been trying to shift from that work into more accountability work to see how that's important to do emancipatory work from patriarchy for men, and for men to empower themselves away from patriarchal conditioning and patriarchal norms and role models, but then how to actually transform that into practical, active care, like active work that moves towards equality rather than just individualized benefit.
Thank you so much. I had not heard of, what is it, emancipatory work, liberating men from patriarchy. And coming from an Asian background, I wish I could bring this conversation to the table with so many men in my life. But alas, I guess I'll just send them to you, Hugo. Jessica, you talking about your publishing background, and also you hold circles as well. So you've said reading is a form of resistance, and you do, I guess, still organize collective readings of manifestos, or you have in the past?
Yeah, we did. We did a few times in the process of publishing the book, in a way to see how it would feel with the public, and also learn from feedback. And I think when you read together, you're really embodying the text. And I think the power of words is, for me, I really believe in the power of words. But if you read it alone, it's very different, and read it together and read it out loud. And I think often we did it, for instance, at the book fair here in Brussels, organized by Canal, the new cultural palace, I would say. I think there were like 50 people in the room, and people who didn't really know what they were attending. And we read the Queer Nation Manifesto. It's from the 90s. It's a manifesto that was written in the context of the AIDS crisis and the government failing to help. And it's really like this grassroots background. So in the beginning, it was like just a few people reading this manifesto, but then we had like a mic moving around, and more people came and read and stood up while they were reading. And I think it's just nice to hear different voices, different accents, also people putting different emphases to different words and make it really their own. So yeah, I think it's just like really empowering, I guess.
It sounds like a very like intense but like good experience. Do you see the same people again, or is it always one-off? Because I'm wondering about this kind of transformative effect of meeting in circles. I
think it's some people come back, but we did it in many places also, so not necessarily, but I really think I forgot my point, because there was something like transformative, but
we can hand over to Hugo while you wait. No, it's fine. Transformative, I guess you would agree.
Sorry, I was looking at the flowers and got a bit distracted. Please tell me again, what was the...
I wanted to hear about, I feel like you're doing such hard work. I'm putting this bias on you as well, of what you have to manage in this time and age. I'm imagining when, like you said, when you started in 2019, it looked a bit different. They were called accountability, vulnerability circles. No, they were called masculinity circles, right? And today they're accountability and vulnerability. And I guess, what are your goals, I guess? What do you see as the transformative effect being? Do you also get to see the same people again that you meet in these circles?
Yeah, we get a part of people that keep coming back, and new people that come to test, and people that come in and then disappear for a while and then come back. And I just think that there's always this opportunity to find a sense of equality amongst us, because the format of the circle just takes away some of the hierarchies that even amongst men we're going to come in with different hierarchies, and it just allows us to be in this space in a more available way and take some distance. And I got distracted also because I was thinking back at the circles that we've hosted about reading, and because a lot of our activities are in chosen mixity for cis men and people with that have certain degrees of access to male privilege, the reading circles were chosen to be in mixity. So that was also very intentional for us to always work with texts written by women. So there was also an opportunity for the band to be exposed to what is it that women are saying, what is it that they are writing, what is it that they are experiencing, and then to have the mixity in the group created these beautiful interactions where both parts got to be vulnerable and got to bring it to the table and to just find some points of commonality in a certain way, or where is it that we want to go. Because where is it that I want to take men is that I want them to understand yes, how privileged they are, what they're gaining out of it, but also how is it that they are suffering within it without understanding, and how is it that that is having massive impact in their relationships, in the way that their mothers raised them, and the way their sisters were raised alongside them, the way they're going to raise their daughters and their sons, and how is it that we can start to find, again, more justice. For me, it always comes back to more gender justice and equality, deconstructing this myth of the already attained equality, because I feel like so many men come to us thinking like, I don't see what's the problem, like women are paid the same as men. Yes, but then there's a double journée de travail, la double journée de travail, that women come home and have to do all of the care work. So, at the end of the day, equality is not there. And how? How is it that it's not there? Can you see it? Can you understand it? What can you do now to move towards more equality?
And it feels like it's a very potent question, again, as Shada said in her opening remarks, because we are living in a climate where this discourse and, let's say even the funding towards these spaces, you've said already that it didn't exist for the work that you wanted to do, but you can definitely see that there's a decline in that now. I personally also work in the NGO space. And I wanted to echo the point made by, I'm very sorry, I've forgotten his name, Adel. He pointed out a data point which I also wanted to share, which is that study from VDEM, which is from University of Gothenburg in Sweden, I think. Nearly 3 out of 4 persons in the world, 72%, now live in autocracies. And I feel like the work that you're doing in that context is so much more important. And so can you reflect a little bit on the importance of your work in that space? And also, I guess I wanted to touch upon the idea of intersectionality in what you do. It's obvious, of course, but if you could share. Jessica.
I just want to go back to what I wanted to say.
You remembered.
But
great.
I think it's. I think a lot of the work done is work that seems little and small, and like these reading groups, they take a lot of time to organize, and it's a lot of time on us, a lot of time on the people we work with for low pay or no pay. But I think part of these feminist principles is also that you really do this labor in a way, and I think the process of doing this is very important. And I think for me, because I think we talked before, a little bit like part of a feminist process is that you're also like really looking at the process, and not so much, of course, there is the result and something you want to work towards, but I think the way how you do it and you get there is very important. So I think for us, like organizing these reading groups are very important. And to come back to your other question, maybe Hugo, you can start actually to think about it.
For me, the intersectionality is somewhat of a kind of pain point within the work that I do, just because, the base of the work is this collective shared spaces, and the type of language around it, you know, deconstruction, feminism, equality, gender justice, is language that is more associated to a middle educated class, and having these spaces open in a vulnerability, it's not vulnerability, in a voluntary basis means that who comes to the space comes because they want to, because they're interested. So I do find that over the years, I've had like a big majority of middle-class white men, educated, most of them, somewhat already interested or having some kind of reflection around this topic. So I sometimes wonder how deep the impact goes, but I know that on a small scale, on the relational scale, it has big impacts. And another aspect of this intersectionality that is important to me is often I get the comment either through men or through women that tell me like, your work is so important, but you should be doing it here, you should be doing it there. And for me, that's always like, because the here and there is also, where do we point the finger? Who are we asking to do this work? And then I'm always in this idea that if I were to do that, because it could be very interesting work, you're asking me to come towards marginalized communities already, racialized people, or people that work in the lower classes. And it's just, again, this fear of like reproducing this neo-colonial classist perspective of who comes to the work, and if it is the case, then how is it that it's done? So that it's done together, that it's done horizontally, and not with this idea that I come to like tell you how to be a man, because for people in these conditions, it's very different than my conditions as a very queer person in a like relatively safe environment. So I don't want to like come in and just tell like, how is it that you should be, or like open vulnerability spaces that could then be weaponized against them within the own environment. And for example, that's something that I was really aware when I came to do vulnerability work, deconstructing masculinity with a group of 18-year-olds within a school. Having been heavily bullied myself in school, I was very aware that, yeah, be careful with what you say, because I cannot guarantee that even though it's safe here, this will not be used against you outside. So this is also something that I'm very aware of, how like not to make younger men in a vulnerable position when they're already in a vulnerable position within society as well.
I think for me, because I think I'm white, I'm coming from, I consider myself privileged. I think in the projects I do, they really grew also over the years. I think you start with a few people that you know, that you like reflect, you have the same interests, you have maybe the same background. And I think over the years, we really try to reach out to other people in the magazine, have other people from different backgrounds, different class, different race, write, produce, make sure they were paid, which is also something, you know, like in publishing, I think the fact that we exist for so long is also because we have other jobs that we can do it, but that's not the case for other people. In the project we did with the bar, we were at one point 11 people involved.
So the bar is the Mothers and Daughters Bar?
Yes.
And
yes.
that's an actual bar? Or a cultural production?
It's an ephemeral bar.
Okay.
It existed for 5 editions between 2017 and 2023.
I have to ask how you named it that, because it's an amazing name, Mothers and Daughters.
Oh, I think it's a bit of a joke, tongue-in-cheek. That often, like a lesbian couple, people think they're a mother and a daughter. It's really a take on like how people can't read really what they see, and there's so much thinking stereotypes, and the idea that you could be lovers, or you know, that's something for a lot of people it's really unimaginable. So it's really totally on that tree. But we also there had people from many different backgrounds, and so we had like quite a lot of projects in non-mixicity, just to give like to create like safer spaces or like a safe environment for specific groups that might need it. We did workshops, for instance, on deconstructing a white privilege, etc., etc. These were, of course, also and already doing that leads to bigger discussions. But you were asking also about the funding, and something we have been encountering is by doing things more separate sometimes when it's needed for safety and whatever, that some of the people who pay the funding find it complicated because it's not really like inclusive enough, or this idea of inclusivity or equality can become very one-dimensional.
Why would that not be inclusive enough? Like, I'm not asking you to speak for the funder, but yeah, it's just...
I think I think with them often it's quite one-dimensional, like everybody's equal. Of course, like these kind of discussions. So I think also doing these projects learned us a lot of things that we fed back to or give back as input to sometimes like people paying funding or governments or other policy making.
Definitely, and I think it made me also look at your work that you do with Kaaitheater. I should be able to say that properly. And how do you, working within the institutions as well as you guys running your own physical, private, not secret spaces. Why did I say secret spaces?
Secret services.
Safe spaces, they're not secret. How do you think that helps move? How is that experience for you working with institutions and trying to do your work? Do you feel like you're compressed again and need to go back to your own places to help it flow? Like, how does it fight that dominant narratives? Maybe just a bit of experience that you've had with your institutional work, because we are kind of referring to them as well as the funders. Or
yeah, for me, it's I go back and forth. And I think sometimes it's really nice to be in an institution. I don't have to do funding applications. I don't have to look for money. It's there. It's other people who take care of it. You can bring in people that you think deserve chances. You can, all these policies we've been talking about, it doesn't work with like one, one person of color no, you need to be 4, 5, 6, even more. So you're constantly also like questioning the other people in the team. They get questioned with their privileges. So you have these discussions, which is nice, and I think I draw a lot from my other experiences I can bring in, but then at the same time, institutions can be toxic, so I also feel that at times, but I think, well, maybe it's more for the conclusion. I think when you're well surrounded by communities and you bring them also into the institutions, I think it can help a lot, and that's what we try.
But can those institutions adopt those feminist, like grassroots strategies, or do you think there's always tension? Because you both have quite a bit of experience now.
Well, I think a lot of this terminology is coming from marginalized groups and is taken into different contexts. So of course, it also gets into institutions because they also read certain books and theory. I think it's part of a process. I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think it's good, and language is used in this way, and I think also used in different contexts, and maybe morphed a bit, I don't know.
What does accountability look like? I'll ask you this, Hugo, when you're working with men to deconstruct patriarchy from a feminist perspective. So we mentioned privilege, and we are assigning it a little bit in this session to being white, or maybe having money, or being able to volunteer to go to these kind of circles that you run, especially. But what if you did want to have access to resources to make those kind of things sustainable? What would you be needing?
Can I maybe come back?
Of course.
Because I wrote 3 points about the funding that are important, and I think they kind of correlate to this. So for me, in Liminal, the work that we do, we're all volunteer, except for some like specific projects that we applied funding for. But the circles, the workshops, the atelier, it's all on a volunteer basis, and like people give what they can or what they want in regards to what it's possible for them. So that means that we're doing very meaningful work and we're very passionate about it, but it is a form of precarity in what we do. Another thing that is important to name is also like how aware we are that the funding that is allocated for this type of institutions and the type of work that we want to contribute to is very little, very small in terms of like gender justice and equality. And there's a lot of feminist institutions that needed more for like supporting the victims, like people that are in the front lines working with the victims of patriarchy. And I think that that's really important for us to never forget that, that's also a necessity. But I think that it would be ideal that there is a new stream of funding that could be available for the prevention work, because that's where I see our work coming. And I don't want to be taking from one side, because that's also what's criticized, to the institutions that are working with men, for men. And, I'm very aware of that, so very conscious of that. How can we also find a way to balance that privilege of getting some funding so that we can continue to do the work that we do in the perennial way, not in just a precarious way. And then working with institutions is another story. How the small opportunities that I was encountered by women who were like, oh, thank God you're here to make these men listen finally to this. But at the same time, other experiences in which the same people are inside that institution saying, we have our hands tied because, your suggestions are great, we want to do this, but actually it's not feasible because there's all of these barriers that are coming from above. We want to give consent trainings, but they have to adapt to this, so we cannot bring a more radical perspective or a more intersectional perspective, because then that we would be going against the values of the institution or the rules that have been put in place. And then in one of the situations we were talking about, I had to suggest to the people, because we were talking about transformative justice within this institution, I had to suggest, I think at this point, with the people who want to do this transformative justice, you have to bring it outside of the institution. Otherwise, as you say, your hands are tied, and then this work is just going to die, and everyone is just going to burn out, and impunity is going to continue, and transformation is not going to take place. So again, how these conversations have to continue in multiple loops of power, not just with the individuals that want to lead the work, but the people who create the frameworks and the people that then decide upon the framework. So it just needs to be a constant dialogue.
I feel like it almost goes back to what you were saying, Jessica, about being very intentional and taking care and taking this space. Yeah,
but I think what you say totally echoes with me as well.
These two are friends, by the way, so we've got a bit of love going on the stage. We've got only 13 minutes left. Sorry for being very precise. I'm reading off my timer. Is there any questions from the audience for Hugo or Jessica about what they do? Yes, why not? Tamina. Yes, sure.
Thank you. Thanks so much. So I wanted to ask you about how we can educate young boys. And by young, I mean, let's just start from 4 or 5. Let's just start from when they're born. So as a mother of a little boy, and doing what I do, when every time I look at anything misogynistic, I always go and I want to understand where the boys are coming from. So I think the education you mentioned, and you also talked about mothers and how they're training or how they're working with their kids. So what would be your thoughts on this? What are your suggestions? How can we invest in a future of men from early on? So they don't have to go through the difficulties that patriarchy brings for them.
That is a beautiful question, and yet very complex, because I think that working with boys is easy until a certain age. I was raised by a single mom, that's why I'm also very feminist. I owe it to her. So having a mother who already believes in it makes it easy and accessible, but studies show that at the age of 7, there is a shift, and you're bound to lose your boy at some point. But you get him back, and we see this on other studies around men who came out of the masculinist spheres, and there are discourses of, it's a phase. But it's just at some point, the social identity and the belonging is going to be more important, and we were talking about it in the previous panel and in the keynote speaking. Thank you so much for what you said, so beautiful, that at some point the language and wanting to belong goes over what actually the consequences are. And again, it's coming back to, do you really believe this? Yeah, all of these more horizontal conversations, is this what you really think, or is this what your collective is thinking? Where are you inside of this story? And also understanding where that importance to belonging and to having some safety, because safety is in numbers. And I see this also with adult men who want to be holding their male friends accountable at some point. They don't want to be the odd one out that is just, always bringing up the responsibility and then at some point just being excluded from the group. So these are real emotional politics that really are really important to keep in mind. So it's every day a little bit and bringing back and, yeah, having conversations that are opening and not closing the dialogue are really important. Yeah.
Thank you. Following up on Tamina's question, Hugo, she talked about mothers, but I'm curious about the role of sisters. Does having a sister, an older sister or a younger sister, but especially an older sister, who sort of, changes, does that change a boy's? And while we're talking of family, what about grandmothers?
Ooh. I'm trying to understand how to respond to this from not just an intuitive way, but I guess I'll have to go through my intuitive response that is coming up first. First of all, being Portuguese, I would say that grandmothers can hold a very patriarchal role in the family as well, and upholding very traditional perspectives. But also grandmothers are these ones that can always like slap the butt of the guy and be like, no matter what age, and like calm them down because they represent an authority always. So I do believe in grandmothers, but depends on what they're defending. I'll have to say that with that disclaimer. Sisters, I find sisters a very important role, and this is something that I always come back to when I'm talking to a man is like, do you have a sister? Because that's always like the empathy link that is the most available, because many men, regardless if they're younger or older, they're going to be very protective of the sister, right? The sister that needs that protection. But like, and like, what actually is your sister's experience? How do you, like, what is it that you know about how your sister navigates life that is different from yours? How do you go about it? Yeah. And not in the realm of the family, but relating to the family, I've been seeing a lot of examples on Instagram of people using the example of like, would you trust an adult man to be the babysitter to your kids? And use that as a way to be like, so is it all men or not all men? Because you don't know if that babysitter is going to be yes men or not all men, right? So as still like going back to the family, it's always useful to like see, again, trigger that emotional chord to see what is safe, what is not, what is allowed, what is okay, what is not. I don't know if you want to add anything. Since Mothers and Daughters is the name of the project.
Yeah, but
Architecture of care.
I wanted to add, I think my intuitive, no, but like maybe more from my experience, I think it's also a lot about the non-nuclear family, so new family constellations. I'm very involved in that, and I have many friends with kids that are raised in different setups, and so I think there's a lot to learn from that. And I think also as a parent, I am not a parent, so I don't know, but I think learn, read, share, I guess. And maybe also like what you said, keep options open. I think, yeah, so I see it, I have nephews and nieces, I see the societal pressure, you know, and also the pressure of the parents to perform, and this whole idea of this heteronormative, yeah, construct, I guess.
Could I add another suggestion? Thank you. This actually comes from Pauline Ferrari, who wrote the book Formée à la haine des femmes, Raised to Hate Women. The book is in French at the moment, I think, only. At some point in the solutions and the strategies, Pauline, she recommends scrolling together through Instagram and TikTok, just to see what comes up. What is it that the algorithm is exposing at the moment? Because it's going to keep evolving based on interest. And also little strategies of just sending memes or reels that are of feminist content, because just the fact of opening it, it's going to influence the algorithm. So it's going to like create political pollution and like divert and yeah, create little forms of resistance. Yeah, thank you.
That's definitely not classified as a crime yet, to influence someone else's algorithm by clicking on the opposite, but it's a very good suggestion. So we've got 5 minutes left, and I'll ask you guys a closing question, but if there is one more question from the audience, we'd be very happy to hear it. Yes?
Thank you. So it's a two-part question. I'll try and keep it simple. First of all, you've got a room full of multipliers here. How can we do the work to help you amplify what you do and also build a greater architecture for this transformative justice? But second part of that question is, this work also seems to fall mostly on queer, female, marginalized voices. How do we make the people in power take accountability and step up and actually start doing some of this work as well?
Very good question, but also a very layered, complicated question, I guess. I think your first question, through our work, we have met people in institutions who have been funneling funds, I guess, to people who are not necessarily having access to it, and have been very supportive and helpful. So I think that's maybe something that could help, I guess, because there is really like a gap, unfortunately, between the more corporate or institutional or policy-making world and the political world, and then, of course, like all the grassroots organizations. The second question, I forgot.
We can ask Hugo, as we're running out of time.
I also have the first question in mind. If you know of any funding possibilities that I'm not aware of, please do email this to us. Come and help us write the subsidies, because it's a whole language that requires a lot of technicity that, most of us doing this on a voluntary basis with many jobs on the side don't have the time, the capacity, the resources to do. So the more support we can have, the better. And I know that there are people who are connected to people that love doing this type of work. If you love doing this type of work, help. And your second question was? It was about how holding people accountable. Yeah.
People who are responsible for this, step up.
Yeah. That's it.
To be continued in a private chat, because we are all available to each other all day, I think.
No, but I think it's one thing, I think someone brought it up. You were asking about the institution where I work. And of course, like within this institutional world, there's a lot of boards and control. And that's been, for me, very complicated. And I think maybe, it's also something there, like this power of control of,
And I'm sure we all feel it to some extent in the structures that we work in, whether it's, so I will just end by saying that,
So a hopeful note it was,
hopeful note, yes. So, Jessica, you create visibility and platforms for voices that have been excluded, and you document spaces that can easily disappear. Hugo, you work on transforming those who may have benefited from patriarchal structures and create space for difficult conversations. So I want to thank you for introducing me to this world of creating transformation and approaching it from the angles that you do. And because I wanted to be intentionally hopeful, I wanted to ask you both to share a recommendation of someone that you're reading or that you can share with the audience to keep following this work.
I'm going to be very self-promotional. I think this book, also I'm one of the editors of the book. I thought of publishing the book, but it was really a collective effort, so I want to also mention that. But I think there's a lot of handles and tools and voila.
Which manifesto would you send people to first in this book?
It's hard to say. My favorite is the Queer Nation Manifesto, because I think it's super
Queer
pertinent
Nation
today. Yes.
Okay. There you got it. You heard it here first.
Yeah, we don't have an AIDS crisis, but we have many, many other crises that can learn from there.
Yeah. Hugo?
And I have 2 Christmas book recommendations. They're not about Christmas, but they're like the top gift list that I go to. One is in English, the other one is in French. Actually, one of them is also translated in French. But it's The Will to Change by Bell Hooks, La Volonté de Changer in French. I think that's just, again, if you want to kickstart someone's deconstruction, that's a good one. So that's why Christmas gift, birthday gift, wedding gift, I don't know, any type of gifting. And the other one is in French and is Comment devenir moins con en 10 étapes, how to be less of a douchebag in 10 steps. And it's written by a white, straight, married man, father of 2 kids, and he brings a lot of feminist theory in a very accessible, intangible, with care perspectives. And I find that it's very useful for straight men to read that book because it makes it very accessible. Otherwise, there's podcasts about the 2 books, like many, 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 many podcasts and interviews about it. Yeah.
Those are brilliant answers, and it's been so nice to hang out with this Brussels gang. Hugo and Jessica, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.